Good. Okay, so back to the presentation. I'll just tell you that today we're going to talk about startup marketing and traction. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of Startup Link. You can write us an email at feedback@startuplink.com with any suggestions, questions, whatever makes sense. I'm going to do a quick introduction today for just a second. We're going to start yes. Gonna hear myself double because it's on YouTube. The topics for today, we're gonna do a short introduction about Startup Link, then we're gonna talk a little bit about traction lessons from my blogs and from my previous startups. The bottom line over here, by the way, alert, the traction channels that you're gonna use are changing according to your project identity and phase. This is something that we have to remember. And we're going to have a general discussion on traction channels, and then we're going to go to focus on PR tips on getting press. That's the agenda for today. Let me actually quickly share with you what the Startup Link is all about, so you will know a little bit about what we're up to. That's a lot of what I've learned is basically based on the lessons of Startup Link. So I'm quickly going to share my screen with you. What you see over here is a global startup ecosystem map and a research center called Startup Link. We basically have more than 60,000 startups, co-working spaces, accelerators, and so on and so on. It's free to join, so everyone can just sign their startup. We also have communities, more than 50,000 entrepreneurs in our communities in total. I will show you something that is relevant for the lecture today, which is press. This is basically what we're doing, and I'm going to tell you in a second what are we doing. Got a lot of attention from press and from influencers as well, like Guy Kawasaki, the ministers around the world, prime ministers around the world, many mayors. And you can see a ton of press in virtually every country around the globe. I'm going to try to touch a little bit about how we did it, how we got all this press in virtually almost every country. I'm not sure everyone can replicate it. I'm telling you this in advance, but why not try? So we'll discuss a little bit about those topics. I will tell you that the main thing that we do in Startup Link, maybe the most important thing that we consider ourselves doing, is creating startup ecosystem rankings and reports. We created an algorithm that ranks the startup ecosystems of 1,000 cities and 100 countries, based on a formula that has more than 30 different parameters. Why is it important for you? We'll go back to the lectures and understand, but I'll just tell you that if you want to see your ecosystem ranking, you can always go to startuplink.com, register a startup, and also see, let's say if you're in Germany, for example, you can always filter also by countries and see the list of the cities and their momentum as well. We're going to speak for 1 minute about why is it important for you and why is it actually critical for you. Most people don't understand that. And then we're going to jump back to the topic of today's lecture. So just increase the screen size. And again, if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free. And again, introduce yourself in the chat as well. If you have a question, by the way, for me, it's better if you use the Q&A button. I would see it. It would kind of separate it from the chat. So if you have a question in the meantime, feel free to do that. Before we talk about traction, I'll just let you know that I'll just share our message. I'm not here to sell a business or a service. I'm here to sell an idea. So that's my selling bit. My selling bit is as following. Ecosystems matter a lot. And that the bottom line is that you as an entrepreneur, where you choose to be, will have massive effect on your success rate. Some of us are not getting it because, we're working from our home and so on. Maybe we have a co-founder or two and we're kind of like disconnected in a way. So why should we care? But we should care. If you're aiming to become a big startup, a unicorn, or even a successful self-funded startup, you will see that they are concentrated in a very limited selection of cities. And that's something that makes you wonder, why is that? Why is San Francisco so successful, or New York and so on, or London or Tel Aviv? Are people much smarter there? The answer is no. Cities have network effect, and hubs, startup ecosystem hubs, create network effect that will greatly increase your chances of success. A few examples of what a startup hub or positioning yourself or relocating to a startup hub might give you. First of all, investors. Investors are only spending their time in a very few ecosystems. They're derived by the fear of missing out, FOMO, and this is happening only in a few cities that has success stories. So the minute a city has a success story, then the investors are opening a branch there and looking there. Investors also want their startup entrepreneurs very close to them. So in a way, if you're looking for investors, only hubs. High quality clients and people that will take a risk on your product, hubs. Finding like-minded people that will become your co-founders, team members, suppliers, only in startup hubs. If you're in a place that has a very low quality startup ecosystem and very low activity, um, there's a good chance that you will not find a co-founder just because they don't, the people that you're looking for as for co-founder, for team member, for high quality supplier, not going to be there. It's 9 to 5 mentality. Other than that, a hub will also give you a lot of emotional support and celebrating your decision to build a startup, while a non-hub will keep on dragging you down and asking you, why don't you get a job already? So there's a lot of reasons of why you should be in a startup ecosystem hub. Again, all the rankings are below the startup link map at startuplink.com. Hubs are also going to get you press, by the way. It's much easier to get press in a place where you are located and has a lot of reporters and so on, a lot going on, and you can get the word out. And you're going to see in the traction channels that we're going to identify, a lot of them are also connected to where you are. So startup hubs have a lot of advantages, and our basic point over here would be if you're in an underperforming location, and you know when you're in an underperforming location, there are no meetups, there are no events, nobody really cares there. You don't see a lot of entrepreneurs. Either leave it to another ecosystem if you're building a startup, or lead it, which means taking a more active role and basically leading it and connecting people, creating those events, creating those connections, taking charge of your ecosystem because nobody else does, right? So what's the option? We're gonna this lecture today about traction channel is based on a few things, and I'm gonna try to share lessons from each activity that I've done in the past, because each of those activities have different traction channels or different lessons in a way. And that's a word of warning for all of you that are looking for marketing channel and traction channels. Those things are changing, really, really changing based on what you do. There is no one formula of how to do it right. You have to customize all the channels to basically what you're doing. And each business is totally different. So I'm going to talk a little bit about becomenomad.com, which is a hobby nomadic blog and podcast that I still try to keep alive. I'm going to talk a little bit about lessons from my previous business, Legoland, an online cash flow business, and some of the limitation that when you have a business like this, some of the limitations you have to think about in regard to traction and press. And also some lessons from startuplink.com, which is a tech startup. Each one of them is different in stage and has totally different traction channels. Important, again, there is no formula, nothing. You have to be creative and adjust to your current situation. A little bit about my lifestyle. I'm a digital nomad. I'm traveling all over the world since 2010. So already 10 years. Even pandemics don't stop me. I'm currently in Greece. Um, I'm staying in a place for about 1 or 2 months and then going to the next place. That's basically the lifestyle. Currently in Saloniki in Greece, so feel free to visit or go for coffee if you're around. Why do I mention this? Because sometimes your life story can get you traction. Uh, what do I mean? People usually like stories about other people, not necessarily about businesses. There is always an emotional angle to a business, and the bottom line over here is that sometimes your story is going to be more interesting than your business, and you have to utilize your story also to get the press in a way. So that's a little bit about a few thoughts, and I'm going to go back to the blog and kind of talk a little bit about content strategy and so on, and other topics that are relevant to blogs and podcasts. But I do want to mention that your personal story might be a very important tool trying to get attention from others, especially in the beginning. Um, what is traction? Let's go over a little bit of a boring part of definition. According to Naval Ravikant, which I totally recommend to follow on Twitter, one of the most interesting people on Twitter today, also has a very interesting thread about how to get rich, which I recommend for each startup founder here. Google Twitter, how to get rich Naval, one of the most interesting threads that you would encounter. Anyone actually read this thread or heard the podcast of Naval? I'm interested in the chat. Let me know if let's see if his ideas are spreading or not. But if not, do yourself a favor and go for it. How to Get Rich by Naval Ravikant. Naval is basically is the founder of AngelList, one of the probably the biggest network of angel investing. It's basically defining traction as quantitative evidence of market demand. Important. Why is it important? Because a lot of us are building startups and we never know if we're successful or not. There are many zombie startups out there, startups that should not exist and are basically built on the illusions of their founders that they actually are onto something while they're not. So traction is a very good tool to really understand instead of lying to ourselves, are we really onto something? Is something happening here or are we lying? And I've been lying to myself for many, many years about my business. By the way, it's one of the easiest things to do. So I have traction. When you say I have traction, this can mean either all of the items that I'm going to talk about or just one of them. Traction can be a partnership with a very strong organization. Traction can be investment that you've received from an investor. That's a proof of traction. Traction can be traffic to your application or website. It could be registered users, even better. Registered users are much better than traffic, especially if they can keep on coming back and are active users. Engagement is probably one of the best ways to identify traction because getting traffic is relatively easy. The question is, do you keep them coming back and using your product? And that's another traction measure. And most importantly, traction is revenue and sales. So when anyone is asking you, do you have traction? Any one of those things would actually be proof of traction. Some are better than others. What kills everything and is better than everything is basically revenue and sales. So never forget that. Great. And the two pillars of traction are as following. In order to get traction, you need a combination of two critical conditions. The first one is a great product that is ready, okay? Ready for sales, ready for investors. And the second ingredient would be people that are aware of your product. So that's maybe the second ingredient. The art over here is balancing those two and beware of having only one of them. So for example, if you have a great product, but nobody knows about it, it will die because that's life, that's you need people to know about it in order to buy it. And a great product in the dark does not help anyone. The other way around is the same. If you have a lot of people that are aware of what you do, but your product is not good, it's not going to work as well. You're going to be a gimmick in a way, a one-time gimmick that people are kind of like saying, oh, that's nice, but that's it. That's the end of the engagement. So in a way, always think about the balancing act between getting traction and building your product. And this is the most balancing act of each startup in a way. So important to talk about this. Let's talk a little bit about traction channels. There is a book, surprisingly, called Traction. This is by, if I'm not mistaken, Gabriel Weinberg, who is the CEO of DuckDuckGo, the competing search engine with Google. And Gabriel was actually kind enough to give us a list of all those channels. It seems like a very, very long list, but I do want to tell you that basically the recommendation of the book, and probably a very good recommendation in general, is to test all those sources of traction, because you never know what hits. You never know what hits, and it really depends on the type of business that you've got. So let's quickly go one by one for each traction channel, and let's try to kind of like get your curiosity intrigued by those. The first one would be viral marketing. For example, if your product is featured on Product Hunt or something like that, if you don't know Product Hunt is a really nice tool to launch your startup. Used to be better, I have to admit, than what it is now, but it's a good place to launch your product and get massive amount of traction. Viral marketing can do what Dropbox did when they started. That basically they gave you 2 GB of storage for each person you get on board Dropbox in a way. So that's a great example of viral marketing. Attraction can also be arranged by press. If you get a lot of press, you can get traction. I do want to tell you, everyone here, don't go on press agencies. The PR agencies and whatever, they're not worth your time. You can do it on your own, definitely. Traction can be received from mentions on popular blogs or having a popular blog and podcasts. Podcasts are now becoming more and more important in this sense. So it's something to kind of like think about. Traction can be paid. You can pay to get traction. Traction is not like love. You can actually pay to get it. So Google, Facebook, other places are going to be happy to take your money if you need traction. Offline marketing, like flyers, for example, are also great way to get traction as well. So that could be another thing that you can do. By the way, a neglected channel. Offline is becoming very much something that people are not using anymore, and it makes a lot of sense to use offline channels as well. Email campaigns. It can be either your list, preferably, or doing cold emails approaches. Social media, of course, crowdfunding, places like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and so on. SEO, a relatively sustainable traction channel that you are probably everyone wants to. Although I have to say, SEO is becoming more and more diluted because search engines are pushing more and more for monetization. So be aware of depending on others to send traffic your way. In the end, all of it has to do with money. Content creation, you can either written, audio, video, podcast, blog, YouTube channel, whatever. Forums, you can get traction from forums like Reddit, Facebook groups, Quora, Hacker News, lots of, especially for startups, those ones are probably the best. Partnerships, if you partner with another organization, they can send a lot of traction your way as well if you do it well. Organizations are usually promoting their partners, and if you partner with an organization that has a lot of traction, makes a lot of sense. Probably the best source of traction, by the way, and the one that converts the best is word of mouth. Over here, you're going to get word of mouth, which is basically recommendations from one person to another. By the way, research is showing that this is the best traction channel that exists. People are converting the best if you receive a recommendation from a family member or from a friend. That's it. You're almost sold. It's been shown. So how do you get word of mouth? Basically, delight your clients with an amazing product. So and it connects again to what we talked about before. A great product will get you the traction. If you have a great product and a little bit of marketing, you will get very, very far because news travel about outstanding products. Other sources of traction can be affiliate marketing. You can basically give a commission to people that are allowing you to sell your product. Conferences, an amazing source of traction if you're targeting B2B, business to business, corporations and so on, or government. So conferences are outstanding. And public speaking, another great source of traction. Yeah, basically, so that to sum it up, well, I don't see what is the last one because I'm sharing my screen. What is after public speaking? Can someone enlighten me in the chat? My bullet is hidden, and I'm also going to take questions in a second. So if anyone can let me know what is the mysterious item that is blocked for me after public speaking. Community building. Thank you very much, Mr. Roderick Warren. If you build a strong community on Meetup and so on, you can also get traction. For example, a lot of you arrived for basically being published on meetup.com. We have communities there. So if you have a strong community, it can get you a lot of traction as well. The basic idea over here, and this list is very important, try everything. try everything. You would never know. Usually the most neglected things that you're looking at and you're saying, nah, I'm not going to do that. Nobody does that. And the ROI on those things is outstanding. So it's something to think about. I'm going to take one or two questions if I can, if there is something. Um, yeah, Dr. Ismail is asking about crowdfunding and how can it be used for traction. Traction is also a proof that someone cares about your product. So let's say if you build something and you put it on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, first of all, just by being there, you can create some kind of a speed velocity, some kind of velocity that people are sharing the crowdfunding page, especially if you reach some kind of goals. But crowdfunding can also show you if you're onto something before you even build it, which is pretty genius. So the idea is that crowdfunding is basically you're saying, look, I'm going to send you this drone that serves you coffees. I don't have it yet, so pay for it, pay for the development, and when it's ready, I'm going to send it to you. So in a way, crowdfunding can also show you if someone is interested, if you're going to have future traffic as well. So yeah. Uh, Ismail is also asking about word of mouth and the ability to monetize it and to actually create it. It's not really working. Word of mouth actually, okay, affiliate marketing in a way is people that are doing marketing for you for a cut, but the best source of word of mouth is pure. Is basically a recommendation of someone to someone that is trying to help it, to help this person. When this interaction is happening, let's say if you don't know English that well, I'm going to talk about my previous activity in an English language school, and we're using a lot of word of mouth there. And someone's telling me, "Well, I learned English with those guys. They're great, and they don't have any incentive to tell you that." Then human interactions work the best when it happens this way. So yeah. So again, all those channels you have to try them out, all of them, and ditch the ones that are not working, of course, but do try them out. Okay, I'm gonna move on to a little slide that will also give you comfort about trying them out. You can measure traction channels. Unlike in the past, ROI, return on investment on marketing, is easily measured. Before, 20 years ago, marketing divisions just received a lot of money to publish on newspapers and so on, and magazines and television, and they never knew what is the real impact. It was really good to be a marketer about 20 years ago. Now it's no longer the case. Basically, now everything can be measured with Google Analytics, dashboard, A/B testing results, and so on. Your role as a person that is in charge of getting traction for your business is also to measure it. Because if you don't measure it, you don't know. You don't really know the impact, and you can't really tell if the ROI is negative or not or positive. So the idea is really to try to measure whatever you're doing and get enough samples or critical mass to actually see if it's working or not. Okay, so we're moving on to a little bit of my, let's say, lessons from a blog that I'm running called Become Nomad. It's basically a blog discussing the nomadic lifestyle. A few lessons, quick lessons from that. So first of all, having a personal blog or a podcast can help you develop a personal brand. You never know if your startup is going to survive, right? But the idea is that your personal brand and people that are following you on some kind of a hobby project, it's gonna probably be there on the long term. So that's kind of like the beauty of having some kind of a personal hobby that you can always leverage this to build your startup in a way. So for example, now everyone in Become Nomad knows that I'm working on Startup Link in a way. So in a way, you can always create a situation in which you're leveraging your personal brand for any activity that you do. The I will say that building a personal brand also creates opportunities that are going to be very beneficial for your startup. For example, I got invited to conferences and so on by having Become Nomad, and then I could meet people that are relevant for Startup Link. And as I mentioned before, a personal story is a winner. If you have a personal story when your product is still not interesting or still not mature enough, you can push your startup using this personal story. So the big question is going to be Startup Link. I'll show you a little bit of evolution of stories. In the beginning of Startup Link, it was not as mature enough or validated enough for people to write about it. So in some cases, I pushed the angle of the digital nomad building a global startup ecosystem map. My co-founder also did the same. Rodrigo is here, had a really interesting story about being a firefighter in the past, and also lots of other places that he's been and so on. So we actually pushed our personal stories to get articles on Business Insider, on CNN, and so on. I have to tell you now in those days, currently, Startup Link is working with about 50 governments, municipalities, economic development corporations. We have projects with the UN, with also with the World Bank. No more stories about nomadic lifestyle. So what I did in the past to get the initial traction, of course, now when the business is more serious, you're basically changing totally the strategy, because being a digital nomad and nomadic is not necessarily good to get contracts with governments, right? So the idea is for each phase of the business, you can utilize your story and then make it go, make it disappear in a way. So that's kind of like an interesting thing to maybe consider. Okay, good. So let's move on to the next slide that is talking a little bit about general content tips, because Become Nomad is a blog, and I want to talk to you a little bit about content and SEO in general. If you're the best in the world in the content that you produce, you're going to get traffic. So one of my only advice on content is try to niche down on a specific topic. If you're trying to catch too much, someone that is niching down on one of those things is going to beat you. So that's one thing. Content can get you organic traffic, but only if it's unique and high quality. Google now has ways to understand if people are like your content or not, through bounce rate and seeing other things. If it's not of high quality, it's not going to work. And I'll just say one more thing on content production. It is very powerful. You can get a lot of leads and sales from SEO, but the investment over here is very long term. If you don't have time and you need to see results in 1 month, content is not your best strategy. So always see what's your situation and adjust it to your situation. I'm going to tell you a little bit about traction lessons that I've learned from a relatively boring business that I had before called Legoland. This is an online language school. We teach languages online, a cash flow business. I want to talk a little bit about about limitations of some businesses, because I don't want to influence you to kind of like think everyone can get press and everything is hyped. In some cases, it's not the case. Legoland is basically a site that teaches people languages online. Now, what did we learn over there? That for most business that are achieving some kind of a product market fit, the best channel of traction is paid advertising. There is a reason why Google and Facebook are so big. They have the attention of the global population. There's no way around it. So if you have some kind of a business model that works, it is very likely that in order to scale it and really get it to the levels that you want, especially if it's B2C, business to consumer, paid advertising is going to be the best way to go. And that's not necessarily bad if you can make money out of it. Of course, Google are going to take a big share of it, but if you can still make money out of it, it's not necessarily bad. What I want to tell you about Legoland is that I've learned that not all startups are relevant for getting press or going viral. In Legoland, we try to get press. You've seen the amount of press I got in Startup Link. In Legoland, it was very low. We got press, but it was much more difficult. There are some businesses that are not necessarily having a lot of interest in the general public or an ability to create stories based on them. So do know if you're in a business that should rely on press or not. In some cases, there is no real story. However, what we discovered on Legoland, something that I shared with you before, word of mouth is the best converting traction channel. If you have clients that are enjoying the service and are thankful for it existing, they will spread the news as well. So, and I will tell you something that is semi-relevant to traction. One of the most important things is to focus on testimonials and showcasing your clients. So press is nice, but testimonials from real people is strong, and showcasing that real companies and big corporations are working with you is even stronger. People usually all this thing about traction and press is a little bit psychological. It's basically your way to demonstrate your worth and demonstrating to people that they don't really have to take a big risk if they use your product. They're actually, you're basically telling them, look, if Cisco and Intel are using my product, you're not taking a very big risk using my products as well. If Forbes and CNN wrote about me, they validated me already. You're not going to fall for some kind of a scam in a way. So that's the real value of traction and of validation in a way. That's a little bit about that. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we've learned in Startup Link about traction. And again, if you have questions, feel free to ask them either in the chat or in the Q&A. Yeah, so Startup Link, I showed it to you, a global startup map. That's a relatively cool project, right? You see it, you say, whoa, okay, nice, a global map of startups and rankings of startup ecosystems and so on. So you can kind of tell by definition that this thing is gonna receive interest, and it does. We actually counted almost, if not probably more than 1,000 press articles about Startup Link. So let me show you a quick graph of how the beginning of Startup Link looked like. Zero traffic, and then Guy Kawasaki tweeted and did a social media post about us, increasing, product hunt launch, and then everyone else, a lot of press and everyone else. This is relatively nice, and this does not have to be your path. Every business, your traction would look totally different. What we did is, first of all, try to find an influencer that would say that what we're doing is cool. Then after that, we launched on Product Hunt and got people to upvote us and say that it's cool. And then all the press picked up, and we had a crazy year of basically a lot of traction. I do want to tell you, later, it totally diminished. So you have to keep on creating the news, and you have to build a product that will make sure that people are coming back. It's not enough to get it's like a sugar rush, you know. You eat a lot of sugar, it keeps you for 15 minutes, and then you're dead. So the idea is that, again, the connection between have a great product when you get the traction, because only one of them is not going to be enough. But this is some kind of a path that we took that basically work. Now, let's talk a little bit about why PR and media are critical for your success. You know what? Let me rephrase this, although it's written here. They're not critical, they're important. You can make it big without PR and media. There are great businesses out there that made it big without receiving any press mentions and without a lot of attention. But it helps. Let's talk about why does it help. So first of all, if you get press attention, you can get tens of thousands of potential clients visiting your site. And remember, if not, you have to pay for those tens of thousands. You can get those tens of thousands, but if you get them organically through a magazine and so on, and you get them free as well, you save a lot of money instead of paying Google and Facebook tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on the same amount of people. Just make sure that when you get the traffic, you sell something. I have to tell you that when we started Startup Link and we got all the traffic, we sold nothing. So in a way, it was hype, but in a way we had nothing to sell because we were still developing the product. So one of my biggest advice is get the traffic when you're selling something. Now, getting PR and media is critical also for validation, branding, and trust. Remember, if CNN wrote about you, Forbes wrote about you, people trust you more, and that will improve your conversion rate. I'm not only talking about the clients, I'm also talking about new team members that might join your startup because they saw you on the news and now they know that they're joining a serious startup, let's say, and investors as well. When you get a lot of traction, investors are also kind of interested to learn more. And also, PR is good for search engine optimization, SEO, because the links are of very high quality. They boost your ability to attract more traffic from Google. Google is ranking you higher. So there are a few reasons of why you want to maybe work on traction. Good. Let's talk a little bit about preparation before you pitch to reporters. A few things that can save you a little bit of time. This is based on our lessons as well. Focus on media that is relevant for you and your product. Let's say you build a product that is helping people that are fishing to find a network of other people that are fishing, let's say, or find where are the best fishing locations. In this case, you're much better off sending messages to the magazines of fishing, because that's where your clients are, than speaking with Forbes. Okay, so always try to find the relevant media. I also recommend to locate reporters that have written about the subject in the past. Let's say I'm Startup Link, and we are releasing a new ranking of ecosystems. For me, it would be much better to speak with a reporter that I know that has spoken about or written about the subject of ecosystems, instead of just pitching everyone I know. And then I'm going to tell you, no, look, I'm only focusing on Amazon or Apple. I'm not doing anything that has to do with ecosystems. So the idea is try to find the relevant people in advance, connect your pitch to their story. Hey, I saw that you wrote a story about the Slovenian startup ecosystem. We now have a ranking, and Slovenia is ranked number 50 in the world, or something like that. Try to connect things. Reporters are active on Twitter. If you have the time, I never had the time, but it makes sense. I've talked to a few people that did this. If you follow them and you boost their ego by retweeting them, by liking their content, it would open doors when you pitch to them. So people remember who helped their ego. Our ego is very fragile. People need people to help our ego grow. So if you do that, you're in a good spot, and everyone needs that. Build relationships with reporters. It will make a lot of sense. If you have a reporter, and maybe even you can help the reporter with a story or with a new angle to something that they're working on, they might come back to you later and tell you, okay, now let's do yours, because I know you and I trust you already. We're in contact for a long time. Um, if you show the reporters that you have a very strong user base of many people that are following you, then they're more likely to write about your startup. Why? Because reporters are now judged by how many people entered their piece. Every piece that they write, they need to show their editor how many people enter, because that's how magazines make money. So if you can tell the reporters, look, if you publish us, I also have 50,000 people in my network that I'm going to share the news with, it will be helpful, not critical, but helpful. If you have a big name like Guy Kawasaki in our case, that is kind of like mentioning your startup, or even a local magazine to mention you, that would be helpful, because nobody wants to be the first to mention you. You know, everyone is scared that maybe they're going to write about you, and it's going to appear that no, you're kind of some kind of a scammer or something. So the idea is that people like to take risks only after other people took risks. So try to find the first person that will take a risk on you. Um, One more thing on the press, approach many, only few will respond. This is a number game. If you want one magazine to write about you, you have to write to about 40, really, or 30 or 40. That's the numbers. So if you think that by writing to 5 magazines and getting disappointed that nobody writes about you, you're basically in the wrong business. Also in startups, by the way, cold emails, hustling your startup. It's all about numbers, and it's all about good quality pitch, but also numbers. Nobody owes you anything, and everyone is busy. So remember that. And if you have local partners that can promote you, if possible, that's much better. So, for example, Startup Link is working with dozens of governments, municipalities, and so on. And in many cases, they have the interest of also promoting the news about their ranking and so on. So always think about, is there some kind of a local partner that you can kind of encourage to help you in the marketing, a win-win situation in a way. So let's talk a little bit about how your pitch should look like. So those are my recommendations. Short and to the point. Those guys have no time, and girls, if it's very long, they're going to ignore it. Customize your pitch. Nobody likes to read templates. People can smell templates from distance. You're going to have to work with templates, by the way. There's no other way, especially if you're sending to 40. But make it like, hey, I saw that you wrote a story about this in the past. I thought this might be relevant because it's XYZ. If they're a Slovenian reporter, you tell them, hey, Slovenia is ranked XYZ. So not something general that you send to people from all over. Customize it to the specific person that you're pitching to. Try to have a little bit of an interesting angle. Again, they're being paid based on how many people read the article. The title is critical. Everyone chooses if you enter an article or not based on a title. If you can offer them a title, a good title, that would be absolutely great. Follow up is important with those guys, so try to follow up with them. If you can connect your story to something that happens in the news, even better. For example, if you have a startup and you find an angle to connect it to COVID-19, it would have been good a few months ago. Now nobody wants to hear about COVID-19, but before it would have been good. If there is a rolling news story, try to always connect what you do with it, and then you give a lot of relevance to the story in a way, to pitching in the story that would make sense. I don't recommend PDFs. If you want more explanation, I think Mike Butcher from TechCrunch has an article called "The Press Release is Dead." Try to go there. If you have a story that is unique, I would also try to offer exclusivity to the big magazines like TechCrunch. You can come to them and tell them, hey, I did not send it to anyone. I'm kind of wondering if you're interested to publish it before I approach other magazines as well. TechCrunch and other magazines, they don't want to be second. So for example, if let's speak about a magazine that is doing technology, the Next Web. If the Next Web already published something or Recode and so on, or Wire magazine, TechCrunch will not publish it. The idea is that the magazines are also in competition with one with another. So if one of them published them, the other will not. So you have to understand the food chain of the magazines, right? So you have in the beginning the big ones like CNN and so on, BBC, the big news ones. Again, if one of them publish you, the others will not. Don't spend time on the others. Then you go to specific magazines on a specific vertical, let's say technology, TechCrunch, Wire, Recode. If one of them published you, the others wouldn't. So you get one win, you go down. Going down means going to the countries, national magazines. If the Slovenian national magazine published you, don't go to the other. They won't publish you. And then you can go to blogs and so on. So the idea is really understand the food chain, because if not, you're going to spend a lot of time with competitors. If you got published already, doesn't make sense. And reply immediately. If you're lucky enough to have a reporter come back to you, do not keep them waiting. They have very short attention span. You wait more than 1 or 2 hours, they're gone. So something to think about. Let me tell you a little bit of startup links traction lessons. PR is an amazing story, is an amazing channel for traffic and validation. We close deals because of PR with governments, with corporations, and so on. And it's free as well. So if you can constantly produce interesting stories, makes sense. If you don't sell or test anything, don't get PR and don't get press. This is something that we did, and we wasted a lot of our efforts in Startup Link in the beginning. The hype and the ego boost it will give you is not worth it. You have to do it connecting with your business goals. I recommend to always build your marketing weapons before you launch. Your marketing weapons are an email list that you nurture even before. For example, I'm launching a global startup ecosystem map. Register to the newsletter to get notified when I launch it. That's a good newsletter line to basically even before you launch, to gather people that are interested. Build your Twitter followers if it would be part of your strategy. Relevant connections. Again, you don't want to be in a situation that you launch something and you don't have weapons in the gun. Have weapons in the gun. And yeah, I'll just tell you that generally the only real marketing channel that you really control is your email list. Everything else is dependent on others. Communities could be a very powerful tool. We used Meetup extensively to basically build communities and build traction with grassroots communities. There is a domino effect in press. This is the thing that we learned. It's enough that one big magazine is publishing you, and just like domino, all the other magazines in the food chain, especially local, national, and so on, are going to publish you without any effort. The idea is that those reporters are reading one another. So they go to the big magazines, see what is new today, and then they say, "Oh, I'm going to write about this as well." So all of them are feeding from the big ones in a way. So if you're in a big one, just like domino, you can really close a lot of press without any effort. And yeah, I told you again, major clients can arrive via press. We've had major corporations with B2B companies and also with governments that they read about us and said, okay, now we're interested. Let us know a little bit more. I always want to remind you, and this is the most important thing, I think, is that marketing and traction is not enough. To get sustainable traction, which would make your startup successful, you will need to build a very good product. Aspirin, not vitamin, something that solves a real pain. So that's you don't want a gimmick. You want something that solves a pain. And traction for a gimmick is very short-lived. Okay, and I think this is maybe one of the last slides, if not the last one. Every business has different traction sources. You have to remember that. I gave you example from my blog, from my online language school, from Startup Link. You have to keep open-minded and test everything. Some things work really great just because your startup has this profile and would not really work in anywhere else. You have to keep open mind, keep on testing. In different stages of the business, you will need to change your traction sources. So for example, in Startup Link in the beginning, I relied on my personal story. Now I hide it, and so on and so on. So as your goals are changing, as you need to scale, you have to constantly upgrade your traction channels. And the good news is that Google and Facebook are going to be happy to take your money if you lack the creativity of finding an organic traction channel. So there is always hope, only that hope in this case is going to have to be paid for. And that's basically it for today. I really thank everyone for arriving. It was a pleasure. Questions, comments, whatever, feedback@startuplink.com. Feel free. Register your startup on our startup map at startuplink.com. That will be helpful. You're also going to help your location ranking go up in 2021. Be a little bit patriotic, nothing wrong with that. And that's basically it. Create giant things, big startups or small startups, solve pains, and we'll see you in the next webinars. Have a good one. Bye, everyone.